All right, so I got to start off and just say that I am not typically one to make videos. If anybody's seen my Facebook posts that I share with a lot of the pages, I'm not afraid of the camera per se. I just don't typically do any kind of video. So figured I'd give it a shot, kind of share some of my life and my experience, and I don't know, just go from there. I thought about at first trying to kind of write something down, maybe come up with some sort of a script that I could go by, or even come up with anything at all that I could reference as notes or cheats or whatever you want to call it. But when I lead meetings, typically I just speak from the heart. I just open my mouth, let my higher power speak through me, and figured I would do the same thing here. So I guess here we go. I will basically do this similar to the way I would do a lead. My name is Alex Cohen. I am a incredibly grateful, incredibly happy recovering alcoholic. I'm 39 years old. I have 3 kids. I have a loving family today, although I believe they've pretty much always loved me. I just took that for granted and treated them like crap. And before I go any further, I don't know that anybody wants to join me, but please feel free to join me. But I'm going to go ahead and do the serenity prayer because it definitely helps me to get going. So God, please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. All right, like I said, I'm 39 years old. I have 3 kids, 2 of which I have shared parenting, so I have them every other week for the whole week. And then I also have a young daughter who just turned 1 in July that I do see on a pretty regular basis. And again, I have a loving family. Now, growing up, I'm a believer, and I know that this is something that there's various opinions about. I believe that I was an alcoholic long before I picked up a drink. And now typically I hear people say that, they were a liar, a cheat, and a thief or whatever. Yeah, I cheated, yeah, I stole, but as far as lying, there was a little bit of that, but for the most part, as opposed to just being a blatant liar, I was just a blatant jerk. I growing up as a small kid, I was immediately the kid that would do something wrong and then look at my parents right to their face and say, haha, that's right, yeah, I did that, and give them the finger or whatever. I mean, obviously not at a really young age. I didn't know what the finger was, but there's a story that I like to share that just kind of gives a general idea of my personality as a child, as well as how, throughout life I kind of maintained that same mentality. My parents tell me when I was about 2, they had kind of put me in a timeout for acting out, kind of doing my typical jerk behavior. And because I was upset and because I didn't want to be in timeout, I literally took my diaper off while I was in timeout and wiped my mess all over the walls. And then when they came in, I pretty much just stood there like, yeah, that's right, I just did that. So that gives you kind of a general idea of the kind of kid that I was. It progressed from there. Throughout school, I managed to get pretty good grades. I did graduate high school actually a year early. I also did end up going to college, which I'll get into a little bit more here momentarily. But I managed to get pretty good grades. I was able to graduate things and get through life, in a general way, successfully, I guess. But I was always the class clown. I was always the kid, being mischievous. I was always the kid that was just being a jerk, I mean, and like I said, just throughout my whole life. As I hit my I guess preteen years, my behavior reached the point where I was sent away to a group home. While I was there, found a little bit more trouble to get into. At that point, I had already picked up a drink a few times here and there, but nothing that I can specifically recall. I don't remember my first drink. I don't remember my first drunk. But I do remember different ones from between the ages of 12 and 14 or 15. I ended up, after the group home, I got kicked out of there and I went to a treatment center. And again, I wasn't there for alcohol or drugs. I was there for my behavior, which is again kind of why I tend to believe that I was an alcoholic long before I really picked up drinking and made that a big part of my life. Um, but while I was in the first treatment center, it was more or less closer for me to like a bad kids camp. We I did some of the activities that were by the counselors or whatever, but for the most part, I just found more trouble to get into with more people that were similar to me. That sense of belonging that we talk about, where I went through a lot of my childhood feeling like I never belonged to anything or anyone. When I got around kids that acted out the same way I did, I felt like I belonged. Another aspect of my thinking that I was an alcoholic, my thinking today that I was an alcoholic then, long before I truly picked up a drink. But while I was there, I did ended up smoking weed for the first time. I had been running away from there and stealing bottles of wine, bottles of whatever, wine coolers and goofy stuff like that. And I think I got buzzed a few times, but never really drunk. It really wasn't. Now, after I went there, I went to a few more treatment centers, a couple of psychiatric hospitals, and throughout all of this, I was miserable. I think a lot of my acting out was based on wanting to get attention, because I didn't like myself. I would do stupid, funny, bad things to try to get the other kids to like me. All the while, I did not like myself at all. I was miserable. I was depressed. I was a cutter. I cut myself a lot when I was around 13. Um, Ended up running away to California for a bit, and I ended up going to multiple high schools based on where I was at because of treatment centers and because of just moving or whatever, and ended up going to a high school that's basically an alternative school for kids that are troubled, which because of that I was able to graduate a year early. However, it was while I was there that I started to really pick up drinking a little bit more. Um, we would go at lunch to a restaurant, pizza, bar, arcade place that was down the street, and occasionally they'd serve us beer. Other times we would actually go to some of the stores. Now, it was my high school was kind of in the heart of almost the heart of the ghetto in downtown Cleveland. So it wasn't too hard to go to some of the corner stores and get somebody there to sell us or buy us beer, if we gave them some extra cash or whatever. And that's when my drinking started to take off. Throughout high school years, really probably age 15 to 17, because I graduated when I was 17, it progressively became more and more. I wasn't necessarily a daily drinker at that time, but it was pretty close to it. Another story that I like to tell, just because it's kind of funny. I when Zima came out, literally the day that it came out, and I'm sure people are probably laughing at me at this point because yeah, I don't really look like a Zima drinking kind of guy. But a bunch of us, well, three of us decided that we were going to do everything in our power to go and try Zima and drink it for the first time. So we drove miles and miles and miles, hitting every single beverage store we could find from the suburbs where we lived, through the heart of Cleveland, out to the west side of Cleveland, into another ghetto over there, and finally got it. Ended up drinking it in the car as I was driving my dad's Toyota, and going down a road out back kind of by our house. While I was laughing, I ended up cutting the wheel, ended up right in the middle of somebody's lawn, and instead of thinking that it was a bad thing or I could get in trouble or, oh my God, what's going to happen, it was more of I literally sat there with my head falling, laughing, just laughing my ass off, and then pulled back out onto the road, wasn't too much damage, and just kept right on going. Um, you know, this is how I acted when I was drinking. I was wild, I was rambunctious, and in all honesty, for quite a while, it was fun. Went into college a little bit later in life, and while I was in college, I picked up pretty much every other drug you can imagine. I went through long spurts, couple years at a time, of cocaine. I took everything and anything you'd put in front of me, a lot of ecstasy. And while I started doing that stuff, I ended up picking up painkillers, which turned into a 10 to 15 year addiction. Over the course of those 10 or 15 years, there was a year or two in between. When my daughter was born, I wasn't taking pills. And then about 4.5, almost 5 years ago now, I took it upon myself to actually stop taking painkillers. Went through detox on my own, and dealt with it all, and never picked it up again. And I pray that I never will again. But through college, again, I picked up all these extra habits and party favors, and every kind of drug that would come in front of me. I had no fear of it. I would just do it. Ended up graduating college, and during my college years, I still had that extreme depression. I still hated myself. I was still miserable. I ended up one night getting really, really, really drunk, and came back to the apartment and wound up slitting my wrist. I don't know if you can actually see it on there, but yes, I slit it the right way. From here down to here, I got 28 staples, had to go through some psychological evaluations while I was there. Somehow managed to talk them into the fact that I was just that drunk, that I wasn't really miserable. All the while, I was incredibly miserable. That misery kept on until I got sober. After college, I at that point was a full-on everyday, most of the day drinker. I didn't care about me. I didn't care about anybody. I didn't care about, the girl that I was with that ended up having two of my children. Everything in my life was just a mess. I was in a dark, dark place. I couldn't get out of that dark place. For a long time, I utilized drugs and alcohol to kind of force myself to have this false happiness. But it never felt good. And that initial joy or excitement that I felt from partying, it started to go away. And I spent a great deal of time trying to chase it and was never able to achieve it. So that kind of stuff continued for quite a while. And then a couple of years ago, 2014, at the end of June, I was working a job where there was a bar restaurant around the corner. I would go there a lot, and a lot of times I would go there and they talk about the controlled drinking. I would go there with the thought of, I'll have a beer or two, I'll eat lunch, and I'll go back to work. 9 times out of 10, it turned into eating lunch, staying there drinking the rest of the day. So it was a Friday, and I went over there to eat and drink a few. Ended up sticking around for quite a while and drank a lot. Went home that night, kept drinking until pretty late in the night, and knowing that there was a big party the next night that I was excited to go to and drink more. So I got a couple of hours of sleep that night and got up the next morning. And one of my sayings I've heard over the years, and I've used it too. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, so they can start drinking in the afternoon." Well, my thought was right around noon is a good time to start drinking. So I would say, "Hey, well, it's noon somewhere, so 9, 10 in the morning, I'm already half in the bag." So this is Saturday, at the end of June, 2014, and I kept drinking all day that day. Went to this party, got into it with the girl that I was with that happens to be the mother of my youngest child, and got into it with her, and I would use every excuse in the world as a reason to drink. I hear people say it all the time, if it's a day of the week that ends in DAY, then I'm going to drink. But I would say, if I'm angry, I'm going to drink. If I had a good day, if I'm happy, I'm going to drink. If I'm bothered by something, I'm going to drink. If I'm in a completely relaxed mood, I'm going to drink. So that night we got into a fight, and I decided to keep drinking more heavily, as well as do a bunch of coke. So that night, based on what I was doing, I got another few hours of sleep, and that was it. The next day we had gotten up pretty early, so there's the few hours of sleep, and we were going to go to a golf course, so I ended up drinking again from very early in the morning all day long. That night we went to somebody else's house, and I took it upon myself, after doing a lot more coke and doing a lot of drinking for those 3 days, I took it upon myself to walk home, and I was incredibly far from home. I was in and out of a blackout. I remember walking down a really long road that has a small airport on it. I ended up going into that airport, fell asleep next to a building for a little bit because I remember going in there and I remember walking again. And I remember getting to some railroad tracks that were right about the halfway distance between where I was and the house that I was going to. I remember seeing a train. I remember seeing the lights, and my thought was, I better hurry up and get across these tracks because there's no way that I just want to stand here and wait for it. So I recall the thought. I remember starting to run. I remember falling. And the next thing I remember, I'm down past the second set of tracks, which is about the equivalent of 2 blocks down. And I remember still walking, but at this point, I'm dragging my leg behind me. I'm in incredible pain, and I have no idea what just happened, but I'm going to get to my destination. So I kept right on walking. Ended up walking all the way while limping and dragging myself all the way back to the house. And when I walked in, the girl that I was with that I had been fighting with on Saturday night at the party, instead of being instantly angry at me, she said, "Oh my God, what the hell happened?" Yeah, I went and looked in the mirror. My ear was actually partially ripped from the side of my head. I had blood and bruises all down my chest, on part of my face. My legs were all dinged up. I was missing part of my fingertip. I had holes kind of in my hand through the skin. And my only idea is I either got hit by, dragged by, or somehow, blown off the tracks by the air pressure from the train. Either way, I know that I should have died, and I did not. Now, I didn't have any concept of a higher power at that point in my life, but I certainly got this instant sense of, wow, why am I still here? Somebody who's tried to kill himself, who has never cared about himself. I was strangely happy that I was alive, and I had this sense of, wow, I need to change my life. So I started going to AA 2 days later and started following these suggestions that everybody gave me. And, again, not having a concept of a higher power, I was willing to do whatever it took. If somebody in the rooms that looked incredibly happy told me, hey, if you want to feel like me, go stand on the corner and shit nickels, you could bet your ass I would have gone on the corner and shit nickels or tried my damnedest to do so. So I followed the suggestions. I started praying. A few months after I started praying, suddenly I landed this new, incredibly great job. I started to like myself. And this, all the while, I'm not picking up a drink. I'm not doing any drugs. I'm staying sober. And I'm meeting new people. And I'm getting this new sense of self. Something that I never had because I didn't care. And I tried to escape it all the time. And it started out as don't drink, go to meetings, and that's what I started doing. But it became don't drink, go to meetings, listen to what they tell me, read the big book, find this ability to think of positive things, and try to get out of my head. They say let go, let God. I have to do that on a constant basis because I know what goes on in this head can be dangerous. I know that I can sink back into this misery and this depression and this anger. But instead, I've done what I've been told and suggested, and I have become just a ridiculously, not all the time, but 99% of the time, I am a ridiculously happy, ridiculously grateful, just genuinely good, loving person. I love myself today. I love other people. I have the ability to love other people. I have the ability to help people, to reach out, and one of my issues in life was that, yeah, I might have been miserable all the time, but I never really wanted to reach out for anyone to help me. I have the ability to reach out with humility and ask for help when I need it. The amount of freedom that's in my head, it's just incredible. Sobriety got me there. AA and other forms of recovery. I'm involved in multiple groups on Facebook. I reach out to various groups in the area. I now own a t-shirt company that we make recovery-based t-shirts for different events in the area as well as just in general. I work at a treatment center, which is full circle, pretty ridiculous and amazing. Um, and again, I'm just a genuinely happy person. Being clean, being sober is by far the greatest gift that I've ever gotten. You know, and recovery in general has given me that gift. And now, as long as I continue to share it and give it to other people, it continues to grow. It manifests. It progresses into this better feeling. And I can't get over how amazing it is. I used to look at the glass as half empty, so to speak. Many people look at the glass as half full. Today, I'm grateful that I have a glass. I know how to look at life and say, hey, it's going to be good, it's going to be bad. I can accept it no matter what it is, and I'm still going to try to have a smile on my face at all times. So you guys, thank you for asking me to do this. Hopefully, it's a little longer than I had planned on doing, but again, I kind of just wanted to open my mouth and let whatever comes out come out. Hopefully, somebody gets something out of this. Happy Halloween. I know this is for Recovereen, and be safe, man. If anybody ever needs to reach out just for some general, you want to vent to me, you want to talk to me, you want to know my opinion on something, or if you want to hear more about some of my experiences, then please feel free to do so. Again, it's Alex Cohen. You can find me on here. You can find me all over the place. I kind of bop my smiling face around a little bit of everywhere. So thank you guys again, and take care.